I envisioned the, sex, drugs, and rock and roll industry when I first got into the entertainment space. But Linkin Park was one of the leaders that changed that viewpoint from the outside looking in.
When you live in the world of extreme fame and wealth, trust is the ultimate currency. Can that megastar trust you? Or are you just a bobblehead that's constantly nodding yes?
I really didn't care who you were.
Well, for over a decade, Jonathan Todd Schwartz was hired because he was trusted, because he was a safe harbor.
Most celebrities, they don't want someone who's enamored by them. They want someone who's going to treat them like a human being.
Jonathan was a powerhouse Hollywood financial manager. He held the keys to the empires of icons like Beyoncé and Linkin Park and Alanis Morissette.
I quote unquote borrowed it from her thinking I'll just pay it back next week because I had power of attorney. The next week turned into almost 6 years.
He was the diva whisperer, the ultimate fixer, the man who looked his clients in the eye, mapped out their children's future and said, I have it all under control. But behind the spreadsheets and the velvet ropes, Jonathan was living a terrifying double life.
Gambling every day. I was having strong suicidal ideation.
Fueled by suppressed childhood trauma, a raging cocaine habit, and a gambling addiction so severe, he spent over $21 million. His life became a house of cards. And to keep it from collapsing, he weaponized the very trust he was hired to protect, embezzling over $7 million from his clients. And he shuffled seamlessly between their ultimate protector and their silent predator.
Like, how could I violate this responsibility to a client and then ultimately more clients?
When the music finally stopped in 2016, the devastation was absolute. He not only lost his wealth, the trust of his wife and his 3 sons, and his clients, he lost his freedom to a federal prison cell. Today, Jonathan's over 10 years sober.
Thankfully, I was able to identify my 3 beautiful sons as reasons to live.
A licensed therapist and the program director at Altus Rehab, doing the quiet, grueling work of helping others escape the very demons that almost destroyed him.
You ask yourself, what is the cost of me staying where I am right now? And if you could really be honest about that, maybe you'll be willing to get out of that comfort zone and start to become the person you really want to become and live that meaningful life that's genuine and authentic.
This conversation is not a true crime recap. It's not a cheap comeback story. It's an investigative look at the terrifying distance between the life we project to the world and the one we're secretly living. It's a story about the intimacy of betrayal, crushing weight of consequence, and what it actually takes to earn your way back to the truth.
It was the best day of my life. It was a baby step toward healing.
Hi, it's Tony Chapman. Thank you for listening to Chatter That Matters, presented by RBC. If you can, please subscribe to the podcast. And ratings and reviews, well, they're always welcome and they're always appreciated.
Jonathan, welcome.
Thank you, Tony.
Your father abandoned you when you were 4. You watched your mom work 3 jobs just to survive. How important was financial security to you? Like, to finding a way not to ever be in the kind of shifting sand that your life was as a young boy?
I yearned to be able to provide once I got married and ultimately had 3 beautiful children, to provide that financial stability that I grew up not experiencing. The family dynamics were really challenging for me.
When I listened to some of your podcast interviews, you said you went into accounting because just about everybody in your family was in accounting, and really math was the only thing you were good at.
Yeah, well, numbers for me resonated because they're black and white. I wasn't good at other subjects. When I say I wasn't good, I wasn't interested in the history, science, biology. It was something, that I was able to excel at in school, and I was not a great student to begin with. So for me, I felt like with the 7 CPAs in my family, distant cousins, etc., that I was destined to become a CPA.
And speaking of destiny, you get your CPA and you call one of your cousins who's in the entertainment world thinking it's time I just joined the firm. And he pushed back and said, no, you've got to do the school of hard knocks. You got to get into an accounting firm and learn some discipline. How important was that to you?
Incredibly important. He was right. That suggestion really helped me grow professionally. I needed to learn more. You're immature, you're irresponsible. And until I see that you're prepared, you're not welcome here. Once he felt that I was ready, he called me and said, now I want you to come work for me.
When you finally had that shot to join his firm, you were the first one in, the last one to leave. You're almost countering any sense of nepotism by proving people that you were a great hire versus just someone that was related to the owner.
He took a leap of faith with me, his cousin, and I didn't want to be a poor reflection upon him. So I wanted to work really hard so that his partners could, appreciate the fact that he brought me on and I'm exceeding expectations.
And when you go into a world of Hollywood, what did you notice changed immediately? I mean, still numbers, it's still a balance sheet, it's still an income statement, still a financial plan, but was an element of being starstruck any part of it?
Not at all for me. It was a great opportunity to kind of provide that financial stability for my kids. I really didn't care who you were. I wasn't going to be a yes business manager. I was going to say no when it was appropriate regarding excessive spending. I was going to be humble because the truth is I put socks and shoes on the same way they did. That really helped me in my career as I advanced. Most celebrities, they don't want someone who's enamored by them. They want someone who's going to treat them like a human being.
And who was the first celebrity where you went from being just sort of a junior in the firm to realizing you had a seat at the table and that the advice that you were giving was advice that was well worth listening to?
I think that happened to me in November of, I want to say 2000, when Linkin Park was releasing their first album called Hybrid Theory. They were really bright young men, and they liked the fact that I was this young up-and-coming business manager. It was my lucky break.
And as you start moving into that circle where you're no longer just tumbling numbers, you're in fact taking those numbers to manifest a potential future. Was it Linkin Park, or was there others that really started to look to you and say, you truly are not just a manager of my money, but a manager of my future?
Really, Linkin Park helped me in so many ways, not just because they were that first real client that I was able to procure, but they had very high expectations. They treated all of their entities, whether it was touring, merchandise, their individual personal finances, they treated it all like a real business. And it was the first time I saw that. I envisioned the, sex, drugs, and rock and roll industry when I first got into the entertainment space. But Linkin Park was one of the leaders that changed that viewpoint from the outside looking in.
And then you talk about winning Alanis Morissette's business by being the only manager to bring visual aids and complete transparency to the interview.
When she hired me, she said, that's what stood out the most, is that you were transparent. You showed me what kind of budgets you're going to present, and royalties, income streams, and expenses that an artist like her experiences. So the irony there is that ultimately that wasn't the way that I presented myself to her later on as our relationship grew.
How did this start to unravel? I mean, you're a young guy, you're winning some incredible clients, you're building this relationship and respect as a sort of whisperer, somebody that's going to give you the straight goods, the honest talk. And then there's another side of you that emerges.
I started it when this assistant coach asked me if I wanted to gamble. And I said, sure, I love sports. And, gambling is a progressive illness, and I make no excuses. I mean, ultimately, I had a choice to either stop gambling after that first week or continue to gamble. And ultimately, she was the first direct victim, the highest in terms of the amount of money embezzled. She and the other handful of clients, direct victims and even indirect victims, none of those people deserved my behavior. And Alanis certainly did not. I mean, she was an incredibly wonderful client, and I violated my fiduciary responsibility.
Take me back to the first time that you crossed the line, the integrity line. Instead of somebody managing their money, you're going to dip into their money to fuel your own habit.
It was when I placed that first bet with the bookie, and after the first week, I lost money. And instead of taking it from my own account, I quote unquote borrowed it from her, thinking I'll just pay it back next week because I had power of attorney. The next week turned into almost 6 years.
You talked about placing that first bet with a coach, and now we're talking about major bets with a bookie. What's the timeline, and how did you go from being someone that you felt you were in control of gambling to being completely out of control?
It was supposed to be a leisurely, week of betting that turned out to, for me, losing more money than I had anticipated. Gambling is a very progressive illness in the sense that now I'm chasing. That chasing led to losing more and more each week. And now instead of taking it from my account and continuing to take it from her account, I'm living in fear. Like, how could I violate this responsibility to a client and then ultimately more clients? Living this fantasy that I'm going to be able to pay her and others back.
As you started to take from your clients' accounts, how did you find a way to even deal with them in face-to-face meetings? How did you find a way to deal with your wife and your kids? I mean, you're living this lie. It has to be eating you up inside, but you still have to have this external persona that everything's great.
Yeah, I was wearing a mask. I put up this facade that I was Superman, but deep down inside, I was insecure with low self-esteem and really in pain and looking over my shoulder every day for 6 years. Like, when am I going to get caught? What's going to happen to my family? What's going to happen to me? What's going to happen to my partners who didn't deserve any of this either? It was the worst 6 years of my life. I couldn't sleep, and I should have had the courage to ask for help, but I didn't have that courage to ask for help. And that's why today, one of the biggest things I advocate for is for people to have the courage to ask for help.
And drugs were part of your attempt at masking and sleeping and stuff, weren't they?
About 6 months into my 5-6 year gambling every day, I was having strong suicidal ideation. And so I turned, away from gambling and escaped with a stimulant to try and keep me up at night, to try and keep me motivated in some weird way to continue with my life. Thankfully, I was able to identify my 3 beautiful sons as reasons to live.
When you looked over your shoulder, wondering when this is all going to collapse, was there signs it was starting to unfold, or did it happen quite suddenly where you went from, I can live this lie, to my lie's being exposed?
I knew inevitably I was going to get caught. Nobody knew that I was doing this for 6 years. I kept this dark secret from every person in my life. So because I'm not only suppressing my childhood trauma, but I'm suppressing this crime. I'm not expressing myself. I'm not feeling my emotions. I'm not involving anybody by asking someone for help. That was why it was so difficult for me. Most people in addiction, they self-sabotage themselves. And I was the king of self-sabotaging, not only myself, but all the people in my life that I care deeply for.
I'm fascinated about this point in your journey. When the walls started closing in, you agreed to take a polygraph with a retired FBI agent. You snorted cocaine in the car on the way there, put your feet on his desk, and truly believed you could beat him. Was that just where the ego was unchecked, or the absolute bottom of a man secretly begging to be caught?
I was begging to be caught. Because again, I didn't have that courage to just surrender. And it was ego driven. It was thinking that I could beat the system. It was time for me to face the consequences of my poor choices.
So on your 23rd wedding anniversary, you're in a hotel room in Santa Barbara. You tell your wife that your entire life was a mirage. And then you have to fly to Chicago to tell your children before the TMZ breaks the story. That must have been the 2 hardest conversations of your life.
Telling my wife right after I got off the phone with Michael Oppenheim, who's telling me I need to come down to meet this polygrapher, that I've been lying to her for 6 years, that the man she thought was, had a moral compass was a totally different man, a monster, some guy who did horrible things. And then the fear of having to fly to Chicago to tell my oldest son and ultimately my middle and youngest son was the most difficult things. I had to look them all in the eye and tell them. I mean, they were my best friends. I was their hero. I was their mentor until I wasn't. In this 10 year of sobriety, I'm still trying to earn back their trust and their love, but it doesn't happen from the words out of my mouth. It happens through positive behavioral changes.
And at your sentencing, Alanis Morissette tells the court that you didn't just steal her money, you stole her dreams.
The 2 people that spoke at my sentencing on May 3rd, 2017 was Alanis Morissette and one of my partners, Bernie Goodvey. And if I was sitting where the judge was sitting, the way they spoke so authentically about how my poor choices resulted in, the consequences to them, I would have given me more than 6 years. Alanis spoke eloquently. Alanis is a super intellect.
Do you think in somebody that's a super intellect is also a heart that will forgive you one day?
It's a good question because I haven't made amends to her yet, because my sponsor and I have discussed this over the years, that you don't make amends to the recipient if it could cause that recipient, in this case Alanis, harm. And I think that it would cause her more harm than good. I hope one day we just cross paths and I could tell her that I'm sorry with no expectation that she'll accept that.
When we come back, Jonathan and I talk about what it takes to reclaim your life and reclaim the trust of people that matter most to you.
Hi, it's Tony Chapman, host of Chatter That Matters, presented by RBC. Ideas matter. Ideas are the oxygen of human endeavor. They breathe life into how we work, live, and play. Ideas let us create and innovate and overcome complex and often challenging circumstances. Big or small, revolutionary or evolutionary, almost every positive step forward begins with a good idea. So bring your ideas to RBC because they matter, and they'll bring theirs because you matter. Ideas happen at RBC.
The irony, and I know her song is ironic, with Alanis was she hired me for that transparency. So now I'm taking from her. Now every month I'm going to her house and I'm showing her those same, spreadsheets, except this time those spreadsheets are not authentic. And then afraid every time I walk in there that she's going to ask me for a source document, i.e. a bank statement, so that she could reconcile on the statement to what I'm presenting to her. And she didn't. And unfortunately, because I wish she did, I would have been caught a lot sooner.
My guest today is Jonathan Todd Schwartz, and this story is about the intimacy of betrayal. A manager who stole from Beyoncé, Linkin Park, and Alanis Morissette, and what he's doing today to seek redemption. So let's talk about the 6-year prison sentence. You described the juxtaposition, I can only imagine, from the absolute pinnacle of Hollywood access and everything that comes with it, to eating beans and rice in a federal prison, crying every day for 6 months, when the money, the suits, the power, and the illusion of control were entirely stripped away. Did you find the person you once were?
I didn't know the person I once was, and I didn't know the person that walked into prison. I absolutely know who I am today. Today, I'm living my authentic self. I'm not putting up that facade of Superman. I'm a work in progress.
What was a day in prison like? Because I have to imagine when you come from where you were, it's not like you grew up in the projects and you had to fight every day for survival. It must have been one of the most terrifying experiences.
I'm surprised I don't have trauma from it, frankly. I often ask myself, I pinch myself, is this something that you're just not connecting with? And the truth is, I actually needed to be in prison. I needed the consequences of my choices. I needed to reflect on how many people I hurt, including myself, and particularly my wife, my mother, my brother, my stepfather, my kids, my partners, my staff, the entertainment space, the community. I hurt a lot of people, and I needed time to reflect, why? I was searching for the why, but prison was really hard. I kept my head down. I did not get into any fights. I was the first one to go to sleep at night because usually at nighttime, that's when the chaos begins. And in the morning, I was the first one to leave and try to walk and try and read. And I worked in education and I tried to help people who were willing to learn past their GED or anything I can do to help. It was like a way for me to start to be of service.
You taught this victim impact class to other inmates. Did you start feeling that maybe there was a calling for you?
I didn't think about it in that moment when I was helping others there. I didn't realize that when I re-entered society, the struggles that I would have to try and find a career and a job and put $1 in my pocket. I had no money, and I was very fortunate that I didn't end up homeless, if not for my mom and stepdad. But I didn't really know what I wanted to do until I got fired from Dunkin' Donuts, where I worked for a couple months, and got fired from another job because of my background. And that's when I got this message from my higher power saying, it's time for you to go to addiction study school, become a KDAC, and then I want you to go to grad school and have a specialization in addiction and trauma. And that journey's helped me to be in a place that I make very little money, but I'm the happiest I've ever been because I'm helping my brothers and sisters. And to me, that's the most rewarding thing I've ever done in my entire life.
How did you know that was a message for you?
Because I have a very deep connection with my higher power. It's a spiritual program. It's not a religious program, but I ask him for some guidance from time to time. I face challenges today that most people would say, how do you do it? And I just view every challenge today as an opportunity. There's financial challenges. I'm not playing the woo me victim role because I'm not the victim. I'm the one that put myself in this position. But like, this is my office here at work. I get here early because I love walking in and asking the clients how they're doing. And is there anything I can do to help you? Because nobody did that for me.
Talk to me about this Eastern medicine doctor and created this staged funeral as a way for you to understand true friendship.
When my Eastern Western medicine doctor saw what happened to me publicly, he called me and he said, I want you to come to this house and I want you to wear a suit and don't ask me any questions. And I trusted him and I said, okay. So I walked to the backyard. I know nobody. And I see this rabbi giving a eulogy and people are crying as if it's a funeral. 10 minutes later, he shows up. He sees me in the last row. And I said, Doctor, what is this? He said, Jonathan, this is a staged funeral. The person who lives here fears death and he's listening and watching the people who really think he's passed away, what they will say about him at his funeral. So when we left, he asked me, what's your takeaway? In the height of my career, and I'm making up this number just for illustration purposes, maybe 600-700 people would have attended my funeral. But of those 600 or 700 people that attended, let's be honest, maybe 98% of them are there out of professional obligation, not because they care about me. Today, I believe, and today the same thing, that if I passed away, I'd be lucky to have 50, 60 people at my funeral. But those 50 or 60 people care about me. And that's the moment where the idea that seeking a quantity inner circle is not what I'm hoping for. I'm seeking a quality inner circle, not seek external validation from others, but seek it intrinsically from myself. And I start by surrounding myself with quality of people that there's mutual respect. I know I worked in a phony industry, that being the entertainment space, but I'm proud to work in a recovery community where people are real and genuine.
You know, you talk about if you had a funeral, 50 people would attend. Would your sons and wife attend?
Oh, not my ex-wife, no, but for certain my kids would, yes.
You found a way to bring them back in your life, because I know that in a couple of articles you talked about this is going to be a lifetime journey, reclaiming the trust.
Ironically, a few weeks ago, my middle son, who lives in Texas, said he's in LA, and when I meet him for coffee, he's the one that I haven't had a relationship with in over 10 years. It was the best day of my life. It was a baby step toward healing. My younger son and I speak every day. In fact, this coming weekend, he's graduating college, and I'm looking forward to being in attendance there and seeing him and his brothers. I pray daily that one day they'll all be back in my life and the four of us will be barbecuing some tofu. That's what we learn in recovery, is that we get to earn back the trust of loved ones. But as I said earlier, through my behavior, not through the words that they can recall or that come out of my mouth as manipulative and dishonest, because that's not who I am anymore.
What trauma do you think you've given them that they're going to have to work through so that they can carry their life on a path that they feel is worth living, versus maybe one is a detour because of the cement you've poured in their feet?
So I wrote a thesis paper on adverse childhood experiences because I searched for the why. That applies similarly to what I did to my three boys. When your father is incarcerated, that's traumatic. When your father is discussed publicly on TV, in magazines, and they're reading about it, when they see that all my money was taken away and their mother had to roll up her sleeves and pay for these beautiful kids while I'm incarcerated, and the hard work that she had to put in and other family members help, to see their mother cry by the way I even treated her. I wasn't a great husband. I believe they're each in therapy or have done therapy. I hope that they continue to work on themselves. That's the timing in which maybe they'll accept me back into their lives.
Now let's talk about your role today as this program director at Altus Rehab. What happens when a highly successful Jordan, a high ego patient, walks into your office? That they've been lying to themselves. How do you use the circumstances of your life to help them break through their armor?
It's a really great question, and I can actually give you an example that happened yesterday in therapy. There's a client here who wanted to switch therapists from the one that she was working with to me. One of the things that I often say in this session, number one, is therapists should not self-disclose unless they believe that self-disclosure can help a client. my lived experiences combined with my academia, I believe is really helping clients who struggle with addiction and mental health. She said at the end of the session, Jonathan, thank you for self-disclosing. That's what I was missing in the past. That I now am confident that I'm speaking with someone who understands the way my mind works. You've been where I've been and beyond.
Now you're providing this sort of emotional support, but you said earlier on you always wanted to be a provider. How do you find a way to provide now to your sons, given the fact, as you said, you don't make a lot of money? What can you bear if you can't bear a gift?
I can just tell them how much I love them. I could just show up a father that is emotionally present when they're trying to engage with me or I'm trying to engage with them. I'm not just physically present. I'm mindful and emotionally present when I'm with them, and hopefully they can see those changes.
Find it ironic how far you've moved from sort of the language of the universe being math and absolutes to much more now the sort of emotional grounding, which is more intrinsic and intangible, ethereal.
Yeah, I pinch myself a lot. Like, who is this guy? Who is this guy, actually being patient, speaking with humility? Who is this person who's putting other people in front of him in a healthy way in therapy? I never understood how to be my authentic self. I'm still growing. So many people say to me, Jonathan, we like working with you because you have such a calming voice. And I'm like, are you sure you're talking to me? Calming voice? I was this asshole, excuse my French, negotiator in the business world, loud and obnoxious and disrespectful. It's nice to hear, but it's hard to believe.
A lot of the people I've interviewed on my show that have gone through the 12 steps say they've been given such a gift because they see the world differently. They have an appreciation for life and everything that unbundles from it.
I don't preach the 12 steps, but I don't preach, period, but I encourage clients to find a community because the opposite of addiction is connection, right? And so for me, my community is not just limited to 12-step, but that's the number one community in my life. My favorite night of the week is when I go to my Gamblers Anonymous meeting and I'm surrounded by my brothers and sisters who have the same mental makeup that I have. See, that gambling is not a financial problem, it's an emotional problem.
Just a sidebar question, because I'll be full disclosure, I'm very anti how prolific we're making gambling. We're putting it within arm's reach of desire. We're putting it on every mobile phone. We're encouraging people who have never gambled to get $300 free casino cash to start. Do you think that this is going to be one of the curses of our society when we view the next decade, just how prevalent and how much we encourage gambling?
I couldn't agree with you more. I'm a volunteer on the Gamblers Anonymous hotline. I get calls all day long. It's disgusting how the companies are presenting gambling as being this sexy thing to do. The idea, like you said, of just having the ease and access to gambling legally today is I had a grandma call me on the hotline the other day saying my grandson is 18, is gambling every day on his phone. What can I do? And I said, get him to a meeting. Gambling is the highest addiction relative to suicidal ideation. We're going to see that unfortunately unfold in the coming years until we make some changes here.
And talk to me about secret lives, because I would argue that we all have somewhat of a secret life, that our persona that we put out in the world is different than who we are internally. I would argue that social media has exaggerated that persona. What advice can you offer to anybody listening who's trapped in a secret life? What do they need to do?
Well, I just wrote an article that'll answer that question for Authority magazine that I'm really proud of. How to get out of your comfort zone, both personally and professionally. Like not putting up a mask anymore. Take that mask off. We're all living in this comfort zone that we know is not good for us. Why don't we have the courage to get out of that comfort zone and change our new identity? We have a fear of transitioning to a better place. You ask yourself, what is the cost of me staying where I am right now? And if you could really be honest about that, maybe you'll be willing to get out of that comfort zone and start to become the person you really want to become and live that meaningful life that's genuine and authentic.
Can you do that without some kind of spiritual grounding? And I'm not saying it has to be religious, it has to be the 12 steps, but do you need a mentor, a Yoda in your life that's going to help you with that journey, or do you think you can do it on your own?
Knowledge itself isn't going to help you get out of your comfort zone. It's doing the next right action. And it doesn't have to be in a 12-step, but it could be with a mentor, and it could be with a community that can help you. This is another reason why I would ask people to have the courage to ask for help, because doing this on their own isn't going to be easy.
You know, we live in a culture that loves a quick comeback story, but comebacks and redemption doesn't happen overnight. What advice can you give to people that sometimes just putting one foot forward is the start of what could become a very long journey, but it still begins with that one foot?
I'd say be patient. I would say follow your dreams, embrace every challenge along this journey as an opportunity like I do today. Surround yourself with quality people that can respect your journey and help you.
If you did bump into Alanis Morissette, what would you say?
I would say, may I please speak to you for a moment, and hope she says yes. I would cry and tell her how much pain and suffering I caused her, and I'm very sorry. And I hope she can forgive me, but I understand if she cannot.
I always end my podcast with my 3 takeaways. I really enjoy your calmness, and I can only imagine, as you said, what an asshole you were early in life, just doing the deals and being the rock star and the business manager and the young phenom that everybody loved. And yet what you've found is happiness in being calm and patient versus just the adrenaline of the transaction. And I think that adrenaline is what carried you into gambling as well, because it's a sense of immediacy where you're now into the longevity game. Second thing, the way you talk about taking off your mask and really trying to understand where you are in life and is this who you want to be, and going after what matters most, I think is just very powerful advice. It's not something you can get in a self-help book. As you said, it probably does take mentorship and knowledge and the courage to want to change. And I guess the third thing is just how much love came through when you talked about your sons, talk about wanting to reclaim that position as their father, and what it meant even for you to have that moment with your son who had sort of ignored you for a decade, and realizing that was the first step towards yet another comeback in your life. So for all of that and more, Jonathan Todd Schwartz, it's been an absolute honor to have you on Chatter That Matters.
Thank you, Tony. I really appreciate you as a host and how you ask wonderful questions and make this really organic. So thank you.
Once again, a special thanks to RBC for supporting Chatter That Matters. It's Tony Chapman. Thanks for listening, and let's chat soon.